to begin tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., and they are to end at midnight on Wednesday the 18th. So it's all the way through Wednesday at midnight, not midnight Wednesday morning, midnight of going from Wednesday to Thursday. So they have that amount of time. We have figured out the amount of the amount of auditing teams they need, and these will be auditors. And I know there'll be questions about this. If you want to be an auditor, you must be a state of Georgia resident, and then you have to contact the county. If you want to be an observer, you can contact either your local party if they are organized, and if there is no local organized party in your county, you can contact your state party to be an observer. This will be open to the public. There will be observers from both parties. And one other key distinction, as the audit teams are going through the ballots and making their stacks, and they're going to do the thing where they do their stacks, and if there is a ballot they're looking at and they cannot discern the voter's intent, it will be handed to an adjudication team. They'll be made up of both Republicans and Democrats to make the decision as to what that voter's intent was. So there will be a re-adjudication of those ballots. Now, we do not anticipate a high number of those because there were not a lot statewide, and the vast majority of the ones on the hand-marked paper ballots that needed to be adjudicated, mainly for overvotes, was in the United States Senate contest. In the United States President's contest, there were very few where there seemed to be any issues. Either people knew who they were voting for or they didn't. Now, a few other things to talk about numbers, and this goes back towards the misinformation, disinformation situation we see both in Georgia and across the country. There are about 24,000 people who just chose to skip the presidential race. That is not surprising. In fact, it's a very low percent, lower than we anticipated. People are talking about a differential between Biden-only votes or Trump votes, and then the difference between the Senate. If you go county by county, you see different differentials. As in Fulton County, as one example, there were, I believe, 9,000 more voters for Senator Perdue than there were for the president. So all these things will even out over the states. If you look individually, there's nothing that's very odd or ambiguous about that. Another thing that we've heard about before is there's 132,000 voters on the rolls from the National Change of Address. Federal law prohibits any mass list maintenance during an election year. So guess what? We know they're there. NCOA says that they're there, and there's nothing we can do because of federal law. And if some senators would go maybe look at this and help states clean their list, this could help to make that a process that could be a lot cleaner and a lot smoother. We have joined the Electronic Registration Information Center, which will allow us to do a little more consistent list cleaning to make sure that we have a clean voter list, because a clean voter list is the beginning of the bedrock of the foundation of trusting the final outcomes. I know that there's many other bits of misinformation out there talking about flipping votes and changing votes, and I'll say this again, the hammer and scorecard that I was quoting when I talked about this before, Chris Krebs, who is the director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency under Homeland Security, hammer and scorecard, this is him talking, not Gabe talking, is nonsense and a hoax. So anybody's claiming that things are being flipped by a super secret computer developed by the CIA is just not speaking, well, is speaking nonsense, I guess. I will quote Chris on that one. So the procedures around the audit is we have to get through by those days. There will be multiple audit teams. We will have observers from both parties. There will be re-adjudication, and the outcome of this will be the certified result. So with that, I will take any questions. Yeah, Doug. Well, when they made the ballot manifest, they already do that. The absentee ballots, which are all hand-marked paper ballots, are kept separately, and they're in smaller batches. So you'll already know those, and so the reporting at the end will be, here's mail-in absentee, here's absentee in person, here's, actually, I don't know if they can separate that, but the batches should be able to do that on the final number. And then provisionals is the last one on those, where we can separate those out. Under the law, any person who comes in second by less than 0.5% can ask for a recount. I would hope that common sense would prevail, and that if it's very close to the first time, the possibility of the computer recount being changing the results would be slim to none. Yeah, Mark.
Concern I hear all the time is that I know there's a midnight Wednesday deadline for this to get done. The concern is, everybody wants this count to be done accurately and on time before the certification deadlines. How confident are you that our county and state election officials will be able to
We're pretty confident in it. We've been running the numbers, and we do have Voting Works here who has done this before. In fact, I got those Michigan numbers from one of their employees who's here on the ground with us, and they have the expertise in this. We've worked through it. We're working with the counties to make sure they have the manpower in place. We feel very confident we can get it done before the 20th, but we're aiming for that 18th. And let me set a level of expectation. We are not going to be releasing the new result counts as they come in. We will be releasing, this is the percent of ballots they've gotten through, this is the percent of batches they've gotten through, because when you're looking at these batches, it'll be similar to what we saw before. We're going to start with the absentees because those are going to be the most problematic because those have the most human interaction. And what's going to happen, I can guarantee, on day one, we're all going to look at each other and go, oh, I don't know if we can make this. But as time passes, we get through those, it's going to be a lot easier, and the speed will pick up as people get more used to doing it. And then when we move to the second round of this, when we get past the absentees, which are the hand mark paper ones, you're moving to the ballot marking device ones, which are a lot easier because it's a name, you stack and you go. It should be a lot easier after that. But there are procedures in place. We are going to have what we call sanity checks throughout to make sure there's nothing going really crazily off the rails. We have timelines set for everybody. And I know the small counties will get through it. And the big counties have resources. We've brought in another logistics firm to help some of these medium-sized counties that have a decent amount of size of ballots and a decent amount of resources to make sure that there's an ability to do that. And yes, the costs are going to be borne by the counties right now. We're looking at a way to do some cost sharing using the state's federal HAVA dollars to help take some of that burden off the counties, but that formula has not been worked out yet. Yes? There is no process for challenging ballots in the audit. There is only going to be the adjudication done by the Republican and Democrat adjudicators if the audit team cannot come to a decision on what that is. There is no ballot challenge. As I understand it, these rules are different, but I don't know the recount rules that well. I've been paying a lot of attention to the audit rules. Stephen. Everything of these things have to be sealed. There are sealed numbers to look at. Even when they're doing the ballot checks themselves, when they bring in every person who is moving ballots will not be an auditor. There'll be people whose specific jobs are these things. When the auditors get that, they will have a ballot tally sheet, and on that they will say, box sealed, and there's a record of the box being sealed before, and they will reseal the box on the way back out. The only outside difference on that one is if anything goes to adjudication, which would include if there's a qualified write-in presidential, if there's a blank ballot, if there's an adjudicated ballot, those will go to the adjudication teams, but they will be kept in a separate envelope that will be tied back to that original box of ballots so they can be married together again after the adjudication is done. But all of this is documented, all of this is put down on those tally sheets, and all these are tracked back to a master log of the ballot manifest. Yes, sir. No, this is a audit of the ballots that came through legally. It's going to have to be a post-election situation to look for individuals who may have violated the law and voted, double voted, and if anybody has cast a ballot for a dead person, that's a violation of the law. However, in Georgia, the state constitution requires that there's a privacy of the ballot, so there's no way to tie an individual ballot back to an individual human being. Because if there was a way to do that, that could lead to vote buying, which is why you can't take a picture of the ballot inside the voting booth until you can take that to get paid by whomever wants to pay you. Anybody else? Mark, again. I'm going to get you a better mask next year so you don't have to go through all this.
So my understanding is this audit, you aren't comparing specific ballots to specific votes or previously. We're just starting over with a new count.
We're starting over with a new count. In some counties, the batches match the ballot boxes. In some counties, they don't, which actually is a good thing as a verification because they're not aiming at a target. They're not saying, oh my gosh, we're off on this. It's going to be a cleaner way to get to a final result. And the main thing we're trying to do is show that the equipment scanned the ballots properly. And the counts we got were the right counts. And the ballots we have are the backup trail to that. So is it going to change some? As I have said in every conference, when this has come up, yes, the outcome will change slightly at the end more than likely, at least the final numbers. If we see something along the lines of 14 or 15,000, we have bigger issues to worry about that the machines probably didn't count themselves right. So that's a very important distinction of this. The point of the audit is to show the machines counted the ballots fairly. And what we have said from the beginning, every single day, we want to get it right. We want to make sure this is accurate, and we want to give those people who believe that there is something flipping a ballot from a Dominion system, it's not happening. And this is the reason and rationale for an audit to begin with. Yes, sir. I'm not going to speak to the health concerns of family members of anybody, either elected or on our staff right now. I'll leave them to speak for that for themselves. I'm probably going to get tested, but I'm not going to say why I'm going to go get tested. It's not my place to confirm at this conference. I'm talking about the voting election. If that's the case, then no, it will not impact. We have a wide staff. We have outside consultants here. And let's remember something. The work of this recount is being done at the county level. That is where the boots on the ground are. And as the secretary pointed out yesterday, the men and women who stood behind him at that conference where he made this announcement, they are the ones who are having to do the real work. They have to get up, they have to staff, they have to train, they have to make sure people are there, they have to make sure they have the 6x10 tables ready to go. They have to make sure they get the notices out. Another thing we're asking them to do is, if they can, please stream this thing live so people can see the process as it happens. We are working every day to be as transparent as we can. My hope and prayer is we cannot move deadlines. We have a federal drop-dead certification deadline, and we have potential backup plans in place to make sure that the ballots for January 5th go out for the UOCAV of military and overseas on time on Saturday the 21st. I'll get Doug this one. There's no need to rescan QR codes because you're looking at the name. The word Donald Trump is there. The word Joe Biden is there. The word Joe Jorgensen is there. That is what they are stacking. They're not looking at bubbles or anything on that on the ballot marking device created ballots. Well, the whole point is, if you count it out and it comes out about the same, that kind of speaks for itself. That's the whole point of the audit. Yeah, Mark.
Just going back to yesterday and starting this full statewide audit. To accomplish that, you set this limit to 0, and if so, why?
There's two ways to do this. If you go back and listen to the individual, what's the good word to say, academics who discovered this, because this is math. You discover math, you don't invent math. They basically said, if you get to a point where you're pulling 10 to 15% of the ballots, you need to go ahead and move to a full hand retally. They have said that on the record as late as last week. You can check with Monica Childers from Voting Works, who knows about these things much more specifically than I do. We could have set it at 0 and would have gotten it. I mean, let's give some perspective. If you set it at 10%, we would have had to pull nearly 1.5 million ballots. If you set it at 5%, you'd had to pull 2.5 million ballots. It is just functionally and logistically easier to go, I'm going to do every single batch, then pull number 17 from batch 37 and do that all around the county and try to keep up with all those things. This is functionally an easier thing to do, even though it may not sound like it. It is a lot easier to do. If we want to, we can set it to 0 and it will absolutely get us there. But the realities of the way a risk limiting audit works is, and even the discoverers of the science behind this said, if you get past 10 or 15%, you may as well do the whole thing, which is kind of what we're looking at here. And it was part of the discussions we had pre anything from the Trump campaign. And as I said at the beginning of this conference, we would have chosen to do this had Biden been the one who was behind by 14,000 votes, because let me guarantee you, of all the people who are yelling right now about these machines and these margins being close that are supporting Donald Trump, if the situation was reversed, the same thing would be happening on the other side. I think we've all seen that over the last few years, that social media puts us into our own bubbles where facts sometimes get a little diluted because we want to believe and see the outcome we want, because it's very important, because to many people, and even to me to a degree, this is the fate of the republic in their minds. And they've been told it's the most important election of your lives, because we heard that every year since I've been alive, but it always seems to be ratcheting up that way. Yes, ma'am. In an abundance of caution, we will always make sure that our office and our employees are secure. I know that there was a situation yesterday with the WSB TV reporter and his cameraman who are put into potentially harm's way, and that's a terrible thing, and it shouldn't happen. And we shouldn't be in a situation where anybody from the right or the left puts out the idea that it's okay to try to intimidate people or change people's minds. This office has a responsibility, and one responsibility only, which is to the voters of Georgia, to give them the right and accurate result and make sure that the intent of the voters and the will of the people have been met, regardless of outcome. Yes, Stephen. It's going to be difficult if anybody doesn't follow anything to convince them. But we got a lot of safeguards in place. We have a lot of processes in place. There's security, and all cybersecurity, which is one of the things we're talking about here, begins with physical security. To get into our voter registration system, you have to have a unique user ID, a unique password. You have to go through multi-factor. We have the poll pads come in that get that data to check people in. Our BMDs and our scanners never touch the internet. The election management systems that are used to do the final tallies never touch the internet. They are all air-gapped. We have, for our voter registration system, we have an Albert sensor. We have partnerships with Department of Homeland Security. We have our own outside vendors to go in and look at penetration testing and make sure there's nothing happening and look for bad actors and look for bots. It's always changing.
That Greg McMichael poses no significant risk of flight or failing to appear in court when ordered to do so, no significant danger to persons or property in this community, no significant danger of committing another felony, and no significant danger of intimidating witnesses or otherwise obstructing justice. I want to begin. And if you will give me this direction, you have all of our exhibits, the way that the order...
So what I brought with me to Glenn County are the flash drives. I did not bring all of the printed documentation down with me.
All right, very
It
good.
was submitted in a couple different formats.
I'll do that. We'll do it in a couple of different ways. I'd like to tender Defendant Greg McMichael's Exhibit 1. It is a certified